Therefore, kindly ask Sigara Mine in our action to just occupy the front seats. You see, you're like twins. I look at your heads and you're all white. So, it's all important. Next to each other. You're looking at you, like, I don't know what the white foot and this one. Okay, thank you. I will introduce myself. Honorable Temba, in this one, I'm the Member of Parliament of Norton constituency. I'm also the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Mines and Energy. And unlike my colleagues, I'm not going for primary elections. I will ask members of the committee to introduce themselves. On my right.
My name is Honorable Robert Mkwena, which lives in North National Province.
I'm Trevor Sawaga, Member of Parliament from Trust Central in Nangani.
My name is Honorable Falim Nangani, representing a constituency called Glenby North here in Nangani.
I'm Mabova Misa from Muzumba Maramba, representing Manchester Province.
Basilia Majaya, Member of Parliament from Central Province.
Prosper Chafion, Madam Scout constituent, which period?
Masamba Matamanat, MP for Quebec Central, Midlands Province.
Are we done? You will see that. I'm sure you notice that there are a few members of Parliament here in this committee, but there have been primary elections, and yes, some of them have already been taken out before, so they've gone to the HQ to appeal. And there are elections happening. So that's why you see that we are not here, especially those from the ruling party. So don't think that we kind of stage manage this. We have told them to really go and appeal because we'd like them to break here quickly. So whether the appeal will be successful or not, I'm sure Honorable Chong and Comrade Mutasa will be the best to respond in another day. But we are committed to this, but there are primary elections which are happening. CVs are being vetted and so forth. So that's why you see we are quite committed to the Parliament of Zimbabwe. On my right is Mrs. Kotu, she is the researcher, and the committee clerk is sitting right next to Mrs. Pise. We've got Mr. Nyamuranga, who is equally the general officer for this committee. I'll tell you the order so that I think as we go on, we take off, and the people concerned will certainly be given an opportunity to then take off. Remember, this is a very simple exercise. We could be many, but these are the institutions that you represent. It's only proper that we do it properly. It's not a witch hunting. It's not. That's why we're all sitting together. Because you don't witch hunt everyone there. This is institutional. And that's what it is. And I think it's enshrined in the constitution of the country. And we are happy that even former ministers are here, Comrade Mutasa. We appreciate that. I'm sure you even know better as first Speaker of the House of Assembly that the way Parliament works, we are really humbled by that. Dr. Chong as well, Dr. Sekaramai, we don't take it lightly. I think this is leading by example. I must applaud you for that. I think it certainly makes our country, really respectable because you are able to appear before an institution that holds accountable. I want to say that I equally want to say to former permanent secretaries that are here, you are the chief accounting officers of the institutions that are involved with mines, and you are here in that capacity. You are not here in individual capacities, but you are here in the capacities that you served in these institutions. So I just wanted to make this clear. The police as well, law enforcement agent, you are also there to protect us. You are also there to also arrest us. So you are here to respond to issues pertaining to what you do. Zimra, we know why we are here. Diamonds, revenue, tax, how much tax did these entities pay? We also want to MMCZ, were these diamonds marketed through you or not? I think these are some of the issues. Marange Human Rights, Marange Group Trust, they're here. They're on the ground. There are also issues that happened there, which they'll also talk about. We also have the Russians, DTZ, who are here. They also were involved in mining in Chimanimani. So really, the joint venture partners that are here, did you meet your side of the bargain pertaining to what you're supposed to do? ZMDC representing the government, what did you do in terms of that? Those are really the issues which are before us. The workers as well, they were affected. That's why they're here in terms of the mines. They equally want to give their side of the story so that we also appreciate the security forces that are here. We're also empowered, and that concession was not given to individuals. The understanding it was given to you because you needed to run your institutions from that avenue. Is that correct or not? Those are the issues which are here. There were companies that you had mandated to be able to run that. They'll also be here to respond to those issues. So what we are going to do today so that we really try and do this in a manner which is efficient. And I remain also, you can always come in from time to time when you feel you have a better idea in terms of going this. This is for the country, it's not for the community, it's not for you, it's for the country. So we're here as Zimbabweans. We'll try and get the Ministry of Mines to respond to the issues pertaining to licensing, who they gave their licenses to, and all that, because they are the authority in terms of giving licenses. You should name the entities that were given those mines. ZMDC comes in as a government representative, also with the joint venture partners. ZMC, we have dealt with them in many ways, but it's the JV partners that we have not heard from pertaining to your role and was it done properly and all that. The police, minerals, border control unit, we need to report on that, officer commanding. We need to report on the deployment on the forces to Marange to go and take over the mines. That's what we need to just hear from you. So everybody will be given an opportunity to speak. So we'll start with the Minister of Mines. Then of course the NDC, they have to come in, they will confirm that true, that happened. We'll then go to the law enforcement agents in terms of coming in, their role. We'll then go to Zimra, who are here. We also want MMCs there to come in to confirm the production, that was it going through them and all that. In summary, whether the 15 billion was mentioned or not, because I think it's become the talk of town. But what we're doing, whether the 15 billion was there or not, we'd still do. I think it's important for everybody to understand this. Yes, the former president was very clear in that 15 billion had gone missing in the diamonds. We take that seriously. He was the former president. Mugabe, whether he's not president or now, it's neither here or there. But I think he was responsible for the administration administration of the country as the CEO would want to know from those involved, sitting in cabinet, giving reports, that how did he reach that amount? Certainly, no one at the time when he was president ever said it's not true. So for us to say it's not true and he's out of office, certainly is not acceptable. I think we must be clear and follow a due process. So the Minister of Mines at the time must be able to also tell us more on that, so that we don't waste time on certain issues. The 15 billion is an issue. The country wants to know. Others say it was never there. Others say there was more. So this brings to closure all that. So we are not here to accuse anybody, but we are here to hear the oral evidence pertaining to all these issues. So, Minister of Mines, the Minister is away. Permanent Secretary Mloda Wafa is here. So I will ask Minister Chidawa to come in terms of what you expected to report to this House, production of diamonds, the licensing, and all that, the revenue generated, and all that. I appreciate that finance was important because there was mention of money coming into the fiscus from diamonds. And I need to explain this so that people understand where finance comes in. Because when you say to the nation, we're expecting 2 billion from diamonds, it must come in. If it does not come in, we'll then ask, were the projections wrong or right? And then if we don't tackle it, then there's speculation. So let's be very clear about that without even wasting much time. So I think, Honorable Chidakwa, I will give you the floor. May you take oath, and then we'll go straight into the business of the day. And any other issues, members, that I've left out which you might contribute to? I think so far so good.
Thank you, Chairman.
So before you speak,
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth, so help me God.
thank you very much. Honorable Chidakwa. On the green light or not, before you start, somebody said, but on this one, you didn't shave. Why? I said, since I became chairman of the Mines Committee, there's this inquiry on diamonds, and suddenly white hair is just growing on me. I can say I've got white beards now. So I never had white beard until I was the chairman of this committee. So that's how effective this inquiry has been.
Thank you, Chairman. The honorable members of Parliament that are here, I want to recognize and thank you for the invitation. I had hoped that the Permanent Secretary, with the specific figures of, or rather the specific dates and names of companies, would have given us that. But I'm sure that you will still get to him, because I may not be able to say which company exactly was allocated a license in which year. That is information that obviously sits with our ministry. But Chairman, I want to just say that diamonds in Zimbabwe started much earlier than 2005. We have on record activities at River Ranch. We have on record operations in very small quantities elsewhere. And in 2005, I understand, is when the Marange diamonds come into the picture. And I understand the briefing that I was given was that at that time there were thousands of people who had moved into Marange. And the thousands of people who had moved into Marange naturally were mining diamonds, Simakoropoza, Gweja, if you want to call them, and selling diamonds. And what I understand is that, and I think Honorable Mpofu would be best suited for that because he was minister at that time. But what I understand is that that obviously would have caused a security threat to the country, because once you have people mining diamonds and selling diamonds and so on and so forth, naturally you begin to see groups emerging, you begin to see each group wanting to defend itself, wanting to control certain territories, certain areas, and so it became a security threat from that perspective. And I understand it was therefore important for the government to make decisions on the structure that our diamond industry would assume at that time, and the decision was made that ZMDC would go into joint venture partnerships with a number of companies, and the process was therefore rolled out to ensure that the companies that had applied for licenses would in fact be given the licenses. And they were given licenses at different times, as the record from the ministry will demonstrate. Others as late as 2011, 2012, 2010, 2011. And I want to say, Mr. Chairman, that in terms of the Mines and Minerals Act, all special grants shall be granted for a period of 3 years. And that whoever has been granted that license for that period is then expected to renew the license. And the renewal of the license will be predicated on the performance of the company during the 3 years, whether or not it complied with the various laws of Zimbabwe, with the agreements that will have been signed, agreements with ZMDC, environmental impact assessment requirements that the country requires, issues to do with the corporate social aspects, the plowing back to the communities in terms of the Indigenization Act as it was then. And so we note that the period of 3 years for the various companies was due to expire at different times. The anniversary date was different. And let me leave that at that and hold you hanging and go back to the issue of when I come in as Minister of Mines. As Minister of Mines, naturally you meet with your principal and you get a briefing on the various areas, and we did so on all the minerals, the gold.
Sorry, I want you to clarify who the principal is, because
well, yes, the president, the president of the country. And so I met the former president of the country, the president at that time, President Robert Gabriel Mugabe, and got a briefing on what the state of the gold sector was, the diamond sector and expectations of the previous government. And one of the expectations critical to this discussion was that when diamonds were discovered, there was great anticipation and expectation on the part of Zimbabweans that the country would benefit from the flows of diamonds into the fiscus. And you will notice that the agreements, therefore, required that 50% of the shares be owned by the government of Zimbabwe through ZMDC, and Marange also, because some of the joint venture partners were with Marange and some of them were with ZMDC. And so the expectation was that by owning 50% of the diamond companies, the companies would be able to bring on the back of the 50% the equipment, the technical expertise, the technical know-how that was required to do diamond mining. And on the part of government, the expectation was that the concessions would then be made available to the government in terms and in accordance with the laws of Zimbabwe. And so the joint venture companies started. The expectation was that they would make profits. Having made profits, they would declare dividends, and that each of the parties, the foreign parties, the joint venture partners, would there take their share, repatriate it to their countries in terms of the laws, and the government of Zimbabwe would benefit from its 50% of the dividend, which would come to the companies. Obviously, having taken account of that which is required for reinvestment, expansion of the company, retooling of the company, you must take that into account before you declare any dividend. And so those were the expectations. And when I was appointed Minister of Mines, I learned very quickly that no company had declared a dividend, and that the government had not benefited from the dividends. There is a difference between dividends and the royalties that the companies were expected to pay. And the companies continued to pay their royalties, and I hope in accordance with the ZIMRA Act, the Ministry of Finance. But I was advised that no dividends were paid. And so one of the things that we spent time thinking about was, how do we ensure that the companies actually mined diamonds, made profits, and declared dividends? And we went into a discussion at different levels of government, at officials levels, at ministerial levels, and the president had occasion also, when he met with the Botswana president, the then president, met with the then president of Botswana, Malawi, and when he came back, he advised me that he had met with the then president of Malawi and of Botswana, and that they had discussed that I go to Botswana to look at their diamond mining system, which we dutifully did. We went to Botswana, the team visited the mines in Botswana, and we came back, briefed the then president about it, and slowly there was a feeling, and the feeling that perhaps we needed to change the structure of the diamond industry. perhaps having too many companies in the diamond industry was difficult to manage. It is, I must say to you, honorable members of parliament, to all the delegates here, my experience over the last 4 years, it is much easier, much easier to run the chrome industry, much easier to run the gold industry, and any other mineral that you can think about. But much more difficult, much more sophisticated, very sophisticated, in fact, to run the diamond industry. And it is because of the value that is embedded in very small stones. A truck of chrome, 30 tons, may have lower value than a 10-carat stone, depending on what that 10-carat stone looks like. And therefore, it becomes much more complicated. And so we sat down to look at all those complexities of how to market. Those of you who were close to the industry will recall that one of the things that I did, having talked to the industry, was to look at the marketing structure and say, how do you market diamonds? And everybody somewhere was giving you what they thought was the best structure. And you had to make a decision as to how to proceed on the marketing of diamonds. And everybody said, yeah, it is in marketing that you lose the money. It is in marketing that you make the money. If you get the marketing right, then you are okay. And so one of the things that we did was to familiarize ourselves with the systems. We had a bidding system at MMCZ, and the details of how it is structured and will be given by MMCZ. But there was a bidding structure where people would bid for diamonds, and as they bid for diamonds, would say, this is what I'm offering. And when I sat with people, I was told that because the producer of the diamonds must put a price and say, this is what I want to be paid for this stone. The buyer of the diamonds, mostly international buyers of diamonds, would put a price and say, this is what I am willing to pay for this stone. And we would then have our own organizations having done a best price, or what they call the lowest price that Zimbabwe must get from that particular stone. And you hear stories of the buyer's price being higher than the price of the producer, the price of the producer being higher than the best price that we will have set out. We tried to investigate those, but you actually do not get the information that gives you the proof that there were differences. There will obviously be differences between buyer and supplier because the buyer wants to pay the least. The supplier, the producer, wants to get the most. But we then were also advised that there is a system called the auction system where you can auction diamonds, and that the system in Dubai and in Belgium were based on the auction system. We were told about the Anglo-American system, the De Beers system, which is the system of evaluating diamonds and giving prices to diamonds and placing them and so on and so forth. And we felt that perhaps it was better for us at our stage of development to go to Belgium and see what it is like. And therefore we asked ZMDC and the joint venture partners to go and auction diamonds in Brussels, so in Belgium, in Antwerp. And so they went to Antwerp. We did, I don't remember whether it was 1 or 2 auctions there. And the prices that we were getting clearly, and I think the numbers will demonstrate if they are called upon, the prices that we were getting in Belgium were much higher than the prices that we got from here. We had an unfortunate incident where a platinum investor who had sued the government of Zimbabwe then went and attached some of our diamonds to the tune of $38 million in Brussels. And so we could not continue with the auctions in Antwerp because of that incident. We knew that that case would not go anyway. And we fought hard because we knew that it would not be proper at law in any country for the sins of somebody to be visited upon somebody else. And by this I mean, if the person had won an order against the government of Zimbabwe, it would be wrong at law to have that order visited upon the companies which were separate legal entities. They were joint ventures with a government company, yes, but they were separate legal entities capable of suing and being sued. And therefore, we knew that, and indeed, the Belgian law, the Belgian courts gave an order after a few weeks that those diamonds must be released, and that if they were kept, the person who was holding them would be charged 10,000 euros a day. And so they released them. And so we then moved to, we said, let's try Dubai, because Dubai also accounts for approximately 38% of the diamond marketing now. So we went there, and we had several auctions until one day some young men decided to switch our diamonds for rubbish, bringing stones. When you go into an auction, you are given the cups of diamonds so that you can put them there and you can evaluate them so that you can give a price to the diamonds. And of course there were cameras, but this young man had the audacity to bring in diamonds, rubbish diamonds, put them on what he had put as third grade, not gem, there's the gem, near gem, and the industrial. So he put what were industrials there and took the industrials, put them on near gem, took the near gem and put them where the gem was, and took the gem and put them in his pocket. And all this on camera. And as he went out, the people went in, checked, and so that's what had happened. They checked the cameras and saw him doing that, and he was arrested. Diamonds were recovered, brought back, but we felt very uneasy now continuing with auctions in Dubai after that, when that had happened. And so we resolved to come back home and set up our own auction system. And so we tasked the MMCZ to look at a structure that we would adopt to have our own auction. And it is the auction system that is now being used at MMCZ. I cannot, and nobody can, say it is foolproof, but I think it was an attempt to have as much value from our diamonds as possible. Now, Chairman, I want to go back to all these were efforts to try and get value for our money. But one of the things that came was a discussion that said, let's consolidate all the companies into one company. And so we would then say, because all the companies were doing alluvial diamond mining, except Murowa, which was outside the Marange area. And we knew that sooner or later the alluvial diamonds would be exhausted. But we also knew that there was a possibility of us having a conglomerate and kimberlitic diamonds. But those require now heavy machines. They require now you going deep into the womb of the earth to look for them. And it requires much heavier capital investment. And so we thought, if we brought them all together and they pooled their resources together, then we would be able to start real serious exploration on kimberlitic diamonds. And so we're now preparing the end of the alluvial diamonds and making sure that we were comfortably situated in the mining of kimberlite diamonds. And so that's what we did. We started negotiations with the companies. We worked out a structure and we said, yes, you may have been owning 50% of a company where government had 50%. Government would continue to own 50% of the consolidated company. But the individual companies would now share the 50% depending on their contributions to the project. So if your asset base, the machines that you have and everything, was worth so many $1 million, and as a percentage of the total value of the consolidated company, it would earn you 7%. So you would earn 7% of the shares. That's what we worked out. And so much resistance from the beginning. And we later learned that some of the companies were not very unhappy with this arrangement because they did not have value in themselves. A lot of their equipment, some of them, there were companies that owned the equipment. Sure, which had bought equipment for themselves. But there were companies which simply were leasing equipment. And therefore, they knew that they couldn't put leased equipment and leased value, leased assets on the table to say this is what we are bringing into the joint venture. And so there was that resistance. And for 7 months, we went into this discussion, into this negotiation, until we realized that we were not going anywhere. So one was to say, if we consolidate the companies, we have one marketing system, we have a mineral accounting process that was common for that company. They would have mines, subsidiaries, mines, but of the same company. And so you were able, much in a better way, to account for the production of diamonds and the marketing of diamonds and the resources coming out of the diamond mining sector. And no, we couldn't get it done until one day we discovered that the licenses, except one, all the company's licenses had expired. And I want to say that the only license that had not expired was the DTZ OSGEO license, which had about 2 months to expire. And so we called the companies and we told them that you are operating on the basis of expired licenses. They said, no, but some of them said, we were told that we can mine diamonds to perpetuity. Some of them said, it's not our responsibility to renew the licenses. Now, acting as a regulator, when you administer the Mines and Minerals Act, you regulate. You therefore must make sure that companies are in compliance with the Mines and Minerals Act, and we told them that we needed that compliance. And but at that time, the discussion was now that we would terminate the licenses. Well, not terminate the licenses because the licenses had been terminated by virtue of their expiry. And naturally, the companies went to the courts and went to court and appealed against our decision, which is in their right. And we went for several months in court, and without doubt, for all the companies, and the record is there from the High Court, to state clearly that the licenses had in fact expired. I got to 2 o'clock midnight making sure that personally looking at all the licenses. And when we went to court, I knew that we had a solid case because the licenses had expired. There are companies which we then went into negotiation with. We went into negotiation with DMC and agreed on the value of their assets, and then we bought them out. We went into negotiation with DTZ Osgeo. We took account of the fact that their license still had 2 months to go, and that negotiation again yielded a situation where we would take over their equipment as ZCDC, which had recently at that time been formed. And so we now had a consolidation not of the companies. Our desire had been a consolidation of the companies as going entities. And when that failed, and we discovered that the licenses had expired, we then, after the court decisions had been made, we then consolidated all the land into one special grant, which currently sits with ZCDC. So all the ground that expired from the companies, that was taken from the companies, is now sitting in ZCDC. And the idea was that because the idea of moving away from alluvial diamonds to conglomerate remains a reality. The fact that we do not have the resources, the financial wherewithal to do kimberlitic mining remains a reality. We will still have to look for a partner with the technical expertise and with the capital resource to go underground. And so that is where we left it at. And ZCDC were working on exploration activities for kimberlite diamond discoveries. And I want to say at this point that every minister who goes into the Ministry of Mines has a different set of challenges. If Minister Mpofu had the challenges of thousands of people in Marange and bringing sanity and order to the industry at that time, my challenges as Minister of Mines were to do with accountability of the companies. Could we sit as leaders of this country with companies where we owned 50% of the shares in diamond companies and not be able to get dividends from those companies? Is what sits on your conscience as a minister all the time. You must ask yourself, am I doing Zimbabwe a favor by allowing a situation? And that is what drove this whole process. A process which some said, are you signing yourself a death warrant? Do you want to die? But we had to do it. It was either I resign and go home and not be there to make the decisions, or be there and make the decisions. And you must make decisions. And in mines, you must make the decisions. And when you make decisions in mines, they had one side very seriously and they gratify another. Whether you're talking about a gold mine, a gold concession, just one claim, if you make a decision on the claim that so and so is the rightful owner, the other one is aggrieved so much. And so these are decisions you make that you must contend with. And so, Mr. Chairman, I think as a preamble to this discussion, this is what I will say. I think that I have a clear conscience. The decisions that we implemented were taken by Cabinet as the executive arm of this country. The consolidation of the diamond industry was discussed extensively and adopted in Cabinet. And we acted on that and proceeded to implement that. The desire being that we needed to see a diamond industry. We had no experience with diamonds. We had to learn how to run diamonds. We had lots of experience in gold. But we had people like Mabudu, who had spent 10, 12, 15 years in the diamond industry in other countries in Botswana. And we thought, let's bring them together to drive ZCDC. So this is where we are, Chairman, and if there are any issues, I am here to respond to what I can. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think comments are simply not of your evidence you're giving us. Just a point of clarity, what we do, we'll ask questions at the end, but clarity, and what I just wanted to find out was, when you got in as Minister of Mines, the licenses had already expired. When they expired, while you in office?
Chairman, some of them expired before I got into the Ministry of Mines. And I think one or two are the ones that expired during the time when I was in office. Because 3 years, if you count 3 years from 2005, those that expired in 2009, 2010, 2011, and unfortunately we only discovered it much later. And when you hear about the cadastre system, Mr. Chairman, it is such an important part of running the Ministry of Mines, because the cadastre system will remind the officer after 3 years that the license is expired. It will actually bleep that and print out a letter that says this license is actually expired, and this is why it is important for Parliament to just push the Mines and Minerals. I'm happy you have done that, to push the Mines and Minerals Act, because it is what contains the cadastre system. We would have discovered this on exactly the day they expired, but because people have to go back to the files to check which one is expired, and you can't do that with all the thousands of gold certificates, the thousands of chrome certificates, the thousands of... You can't do that.
I think I've been answered.
Thank you.
In terms of clarity, Permanent Secretary, it takes us back to the Permanent Secretary who issued licenses. Chief Accounting Officer, your evidence, please. Follow. The minister came in, there was a minister before, he didn't issue the licenses expired. The Permanent Secretary is the Chief Accounting Officer. Who did you give the licenses to? Because we want to understand who you gave the licenses to, and then everything will follow. So that's the sort of pattern that we want to follow. The minister says, yes, there were licenses given out. To who were the licenses given out to? Who was the Permanent Secretary? Was it Mr. Mpazu?
swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
Yes, this is the simple one. The chief accounting officer, whatever ministry that you're putting the licenses, you know, when they should expire, you know. So without wasting much time, respond to those issues.
Thank you, Chair. I must indicate that I joined the ministry in October 2011, and at that time the licenses had already been issued. So I don't know if I can just highlight those operating companies who were mining in Marange, because those are what I found.
Yeah, it's important for us to tell us what you found when you were PS. Who had licenses?
The companies which had licenses and operating were Marange Resources, which was 100% government owned, Bada Diamonds, which had government at 50% shareholding, Anjin, which had 50% government shareholding, DMC, which also had 50% government shareholding, and then Jinan. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Chair, I had left another one, which is DTZ Osgeo.
Yes, you know, when you come before this committee, we write to you and we expect you to have first-hand information. I thought you'd have a file and you have access to any information in that ministry, so that we then don't guess, because I end up asking you, what about the security sector? I don't want to ask you questions. I want you to tell us who was mining. If the security sector was given, do your job, tell us who in the security care sector was given. We told you, come to this committee and tell us, during your time, what were the diamonds operations? We have no time to waste, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I confirm that the letter which was written to me said, you explain the diamond mining policies implemented during your time. And this was a question which arose out of the presentation which had just been made. To help us, Honorable Chair, maybe we could be assisted by the current Chair to indicate the list of those companies who are in the books, because we are all here, so it can help.
So now you see, before we even go anywhere else, there's an answer why licenses expire but still functional. I mean, exactly. Before we even go anywhere, the ministry is responsible for the licenses. Then ZMTC is responsible for mining. So we must be very clear on that. And you must account to the time when you're in office. What did you do to regularize? So all these people were mining illegal. And then suddenly one day you decide to just go and take over. So the revenue, where was it going? Let's get serious with this committee in terms of us giving the information that's required. There's an aspect of regularization that you must answer to as the chief accounting officer. Whether the 10,000, a million papers of gold miners, it's nothing to do with us. Government is functional. There are people being paid at the end of the month to do that. So basically that's what we need from you in terms of regularization. You heard what the minister said. Only about 2 companies are the ones that had licenses. The rest didn't. Who was the PMSEC at the time? What did the PMSEC do about that? The money, the revenue generated, where did it go? On the point of clarity,
Thank you, Chair. I think when you asked him to mention the companies which licensed or which were operating during this time, you only mentioned those ones. I think the companies which had license, but you didn't mention those ones without license but still operate. So maybe if you can clarify of these companies which you gave to us, what were the other companies who were mining but without giving license?
Take a look at that in terms of clarity. Yes, Honorable Kwek.
Information. I think come up the MSEC that was the period here. To run the office. And the other little bit more around
The members are asking pertinent questions. When in office, as a chief accounting officer, which mine in houses with licenses equally without? Because we now are being told that even those without licenses were mining. Yes, can you please give us a detailed report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have already indicated when I joined the ministry. I was redeployed from the ministry in September 2013. So I spent just barely about two years. Going back to the question and what you have asked, I've indicated that, Honorable Chair, Maranga Resources had a license and it was operating. GMC, which is Diamond Mining Company, had a license and it was operating. Mbada Diamond, it had a license and it was operating. DTZ, it had a license and it was operating. Jinan had a license and it was operating. Anjin was also licensed and operating, and those are the companies which I have already indicated, Honorable Chair. And as it has already been indicated by the Honorable former Minister, the question was which companies were operating and which have now had their licenses cancelled, which have been consolidated. And I would want to believe that would also indicate those companies which were operating, which then their licenses had expired. But when I joined,
no, just are you not aware of a license given to Kusena or Kenyan?
When I arrived, the Honorable Chair, these are the companies which I found operating. But of course, you would find they could be at a certain point in time.
There's the issue of giving licenses, and then there's the issue of operation. From your part, giving licenses, the operation will go to things ZMDC. ZMDC is the arm that does the mining for government. So on the operation aspect, that is ZMDC's baby. On the licensing aspect, it is your task. Whose licenses did you give to?
Honorable Chair, when licenses are being issued, like in this case, because they had to go through the government's mining arm, it goes through ZMDC, who would then make a recommendation to the ministry. And when the ministry has looked at it and satisfied that it meets the requirements, it then goes upwards for approval. So maybe with your indulgence, ZMDC would indicate which one of those who had actually applied and were not yet mining. I'm strictly referring to those which I found licensed and operating in Marange legally. And as you recall, Honorable Chair, at that time, our main thrust was to make sure that we comply with the requirements of the KPCs of the operating companies.
Yes, I think we need to make progress. Who can be later? You have told us, we've had your evidence, we've got to move. Who was the PS after you?
It was Professor Blanc.
Professor Blanc, can you then take it from there? May take all of it.
I swear that the evidence that I'll give is the truth, nothing else than the truth, so help me God. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, just to mention that I didn't receive any invitation letter to this committee, so I'm not aware exactly what I was going to be asked. I only got that I'm supposed to be here on Saturday, this last Saturday, when some official visited my farm in Headlands and saw my wife to say I'm required to come to this. So I'm not sure of the exact requirement that I'm supposed to give. But nonetheless, following the question
okay,
that...
Thank you. If we just, I want to thank you for, if you switch off the mic, please. I want to thank you for attending. True, it was difficult to get hold of you. We went into the office of the President and Cabinet, we went to the Public Service Commission, we went to the ministry, they could not give us anything. And we want to thank the police for finally tracking me down, because we didn't know who you are, and we had to resort to the police. So police, job well done, because all institutions could not identify or locate it. So we thank you for finding Mr. Kutyanga. He is a man well sought. But now that he's here, I'll tell you what to expect, Mr. Kutyanga, from me as Permanent Secretary. What is it that you found in office in terms of the diamond mining sector? You had the minister then, Honorable Chitako, who alluded to a number of issues pertaining to companies that had not been licensed, the issue of CCDC being put in place because all that had expired. I'm sure you would not have made those decisions without you, the President, also be part of those decisions he made. Can you just explain more to the committee pertaining to those issues?
Thank you. I think the Minister, Honorable former Minister, gave a very comprehensive development of to where we are, where we were. Just to confirm that during my time, the companies that were operating were Mbada, Anchin, Jinan, DMC, Marange Resources, DTZ. Then there were other companies that were also on the ground, but they were not really operating very extensively. There was Kusena, Jinyame, and Rera, but these were not really producing much. I just wanted also to add to what the Honorable Minister mentioned about the need to consolidate. He explained comprehensively about the marketing, but there was also a security nightmare with all these companies who had their separate security, and it wasn't convincing to us that the security was tight to ensure that our diamonds are all accounted for. So that was one of the additional reasons why consolidation became imperative. I don't know what else you want me to add, Chairman, but this is what I thought I should clarify to the committee.
Minister, clearly issue of ZCDC, and you out as a measure that ensures smooth as a result of having gone to Botswana and seeing the way Botswana had been embarking their diamond mining. Can you tell us more information on ZCDC?
Yes, ZCDC was formed as a decision of cabinet, and we were, as a ministry, implementing so that we have a very transparent for the diamond industry. And as the minister was saying, you needed a big company that could go into the next phase of the diamond mining, in other words, kimberlitic mining. These small companies never went to do the kimberlitic mining, and we had no evidence that any of them was serious yet in order to do that. They were all spending much time on scooping the alluvial, which really didn't require much capital. Also to say, in the agreements that were entered into between the various companies or investors and government, there was supposed to be an investment amount, a quantum amount from different companies. Not all of them, in fact, none of them fully put in the required investment as comparable to the resource that ZMDC was bringing to the table. So that's another reason why consolidation was also taken into account.
When ZCDC was formed, who was the board?
So who were
the board members of ZCDC?
The ministry compiled a list of names to the Office of the President, the Cabinet, and then they vetted and came up with about 4 who they thought should be interim. And in that circumstances, the minister appointed me to join that group and become its chairman. So I was the chairman of the board because the numbers had not been complete, because the vetting that was done eliminated some who were not appointed by the Office of the President Cabinet.
So you were the chairperson of a 4-member board, including yourself?
I was acting chairman of the consolidation ZCDC.
No, I understand. How many board members were you working with?
There were 4 others.
In terms of the regularization of these licenses, which are being talked about from a clarity point of view, who in the ministry is responsible for that, to ensure that they're up to it? Yes, the minister talks about the cadastral system, but we didn't have one. And who was responsible for ensuring that there's regularization?
Well, it's us as administrators who found out that some of these licenses had actually expired. Yes, it's the administration in the ministry. In other words, PEMSEC and the other officials in the ministry. And that's how we unearthed that the licenses for most of these companies had actually expired.
In terms of Kusena and Kenyama, did you have sight of their licenses?
Yes, we did, but most of these licenses were more or less generically similar, and there wasn't very much difference between all the joint venture agreements.
The board, did you get an appointment letter to the acting chairperson?
Yes, I did.
Point of clarity to Mr. Kujanga, Mr. Chairman. When Mr. Kujanga, when you became a chairman to the board, was it in terms of the law of this country, or it was a boardroom program? Then still on that, when you became the board chairman, then can you put names with regard to members who were in that board so that we get details?
Yes, I can give you names that were appointed by the Office of the President Cabinet to be in that board. I think there's Ms. Chela, there was Mr. Musha, there was Mr. Mpepezeke, I've forgotten the other one. I'm no longer in the ministry, by the way, and I'm no longer in ZCDC either. But those were the names that were approved by Office of the President Cabinet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He hasn't concluded with regard to the chairmanship as to what really happened, how did he got there. He just said he got an appointment, if he can clarify that. But just for clarity's sake, Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Mkwegwezeke, we have Mr. Musha, who are members of the board, who happen to be coming from part of the Chimaniman district, where you happen to be a person who is coming from there as well. Was it mere coincidence, or it was purely out of the fact that you had no one else with that expertise of diamonds except in Chimaniman?
I now remember that the fourth member is Mr. Chiagwa, Comrade Chiagwa, who had been recommended by both the Ministry of Defense and the community in Chiagwa. As I said, we compiled, I think, up to 12, 15 names, which we sent to the Office of the President Cabinet. And they are the ones who vetted and gave us 4. So really, the final choice was not me. The inference that they were members because they came from Manicaland, it's really unfortunate, and it's not true.
I think what the member is trying to point out, according to the constitution of the country, there's got to be regional balance in the boards so that there's no speculation. You cannot have a situation where there's an imbalance in terms of representation. So that's, I think, what he's trying to clarify, that is it only people from that village who knew about animals? Or, I think that's the point. I think we'll come to more questions as we proceed.
Can I just again reiterate? We compiled as many as 12 to 15, I can't remember the exact number, to the Office of the President.
That is what I'm saying. It is not your fault. We've understood. We are moving on.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just trying to just buttress his question that it's within the constitution of the country that there should be regional balance in terms of the boards. That's all. Who vets, that's another issue. But yes, you are right. You gave 50 and only 4 were approved. And I think it's in order. I think we need to really continue. In terms of ZCDC, was this company created in the ministry or through ZMDC?
Through ZMDC. In terms of its formation, so that it operates as an arm of ZMDC subsidiary.
Okay, thank you very much. We go to ZMDC now. We're going from the ministry, we are now going to ZMDC. Okay, Honorable Nduna, sorry, I did not noted you. Can you proceed with your point of clarity?
Thank you, Chair. Just how many meetings did you sit with your board, and how much did you draw as allowances out of that? And then the second one is, the last I saw, the artisanal miners were removed from that area. These companies that you say were not licensed and were not operating optimally, or they were operating but not effectively, compared to what? And who are these companies? Was the revenue also accounted for those people who were not artisanal miners, but who were operating not as much as you wanted them to operate?
Okay, I'll start with the last question about some of the companies that had not operated. I think they are here. They can answer for themselves, but our understanding is that the investors who were the partners didn't bring enough resources to get these companies going. And I'm talking of Kusena, I'm talking of Jinyami, and I'm talking of Rera. The others are the investors that brought some resources to be able to operate.
Okay, I think we will now want to move to ZNDC. The role of ZNDC. You are responsible for the mining operations on behalf of the government of Zimbabwe. The joint ventures which have been talked about, how did you mine, from a performance point of view, the JV partners, they also play their part. I think these are issues. ZCDC, company which was set up, was it a board resolution chairman? You heard the concept and it came from you. Now, the ball is in your court. Thank you. The board chair first, can you take over?
Sorry, Chair.
You see, what I thought on those questions, they all come in later on. I think they are quite important, and you must keep that in terms of the artisanal miners and those who are not the licensed, but housed by the ministry. It will be interesting.
The board, how many times did that board sit?
I think those are issues which I think we're asking, and I think the ZNTC board chairperson is here. As you heard, it was formed by ZNTC, and I think that's the question where the ZNTC who formed the company must then respond to that from a corporate governance point of view. The minutes coming to the subsidiary, whether they or not. I think
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth, so help me God.
I'll just bring some order. I think let's go to the ZNDC board chairperson first, Mr. Massimo, to respond to these issues. You're the board chairperson before Mr. Mengani, so it's only proper that you respond to these issues. Thank you.
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth, so help me God. I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth, so help me God.
Chairman, you, Mr. former ZNDC chairperson, and I'm sure you would also be part of the issues which have been brought up. What is critical? The ZNDC is the vehicle that mines on behalf of government in terms of the joint venture partners every time that you're in office, and in terms of regularization too, in terms of licensing and all that. And I think what must be clear is that you've got ZNDC, which is a government arm, but equally from a regularization point of view, seems to be mining illegal. Because it's just not the joint venture partners. They are in the ZNDC, which is an arm of government. So, was government mining illegal?
Thank you, Chair, Honorable Chair. No, government is the owner of the concessions. It could not have been mining illegal. But of course, when you look at the joint venture agreement, what you're saying is you have created an entity between the government holding 50% and then the private player, the investor who has come in. I think it's a moot point. Who had the obligation to renew the licenses? And I think
an argument has been raised by the investors that it was the responsibility of government to ensure that licenses were always up to date, rather than the responsibility of the investor. I'm not saying which is correct, but I think it is a moot and debatable point that the investor came in primarily to bring in capital. And the government's responsibility was to ensure that that investor continued to mine in terms of the laws of the country. But there could be a different view, that it was the responsibility of the entity which has been created to ensure that it continued to mine in accordance with the laws of the country. But what we are saying, Honorable Chair, is that the government was very much a part of this joint venture. And so it is a moot point. But I don't think that mining was being carried out illegally. That cannot, in my view, be correct.
During your tenure as chairman, can you confirm to the companies that you were working with in terms of the diamonds? Can you add, and out of the companies that have been mentioned, which ones were productive and which ones were not? And those who were not productive, what did you do as a board?
The ones which were productive was Anjin, Mbada Diamonds, DMC, Marange Resources, although it was struggling, but it was a little bit better. But the top were those three. Kusena was still in its formative stages. Rera the same. Jinyame was having problems. And what did we do? In respect of Canada, let's start with Canada. When we're saying Marange, there is a confusion with Marange and Canada. The operating company was Canada. Canada being a joint venture between Marange Resources, which was wholly owned by ZMGC, and Core Mining. Now, Core Mining was supposed to be a special purpose vehicle of BSGR, an investor who was supposed to have brought in $2 billion and to invest in Marange. But that investor never came. What we actually ended up with was Core Mining on its own with a ragtag team of people from South Africa of Indian origin. Then we also then had Mr. Kurotwi eventually owning 46% of that company. But Mr. Kurotwi is the one who had initially come in and said he was bringing BSGR. But that transaction never materialized. But Mr. Kurotwi ended up being really the majority shareholder in Core Mining. What did we do about it? The Zimbabwe Investment Centers here is the one which audits compliance with the investment proposals. So ZIA instituted an audit of Canada through Camelsa, now Grant Thornton Chartered Accountants. And their report is very clear that no investment was brought by Core Mining. In fact, what you see when you go to Core Mining are deposits which are being made locally rather than any money coming from outside the country as investment. So having studied that report from Grant Thornton, which had been instituted by Zimbabwe Investment Center, we then terminated the joint venture agreement with Core Mining. It was clear no meaningful investment had been done, and in fact, if you look at Mr. Kurotwi, he never brought a single cent. Well, he's a Zimbabwean, but he holds a 46% in Core Mining, which is supposed to be a South African company. So that's how we terminated that agreement. We also discovered, of course, I think it has been alluded to by Honorable Chidagwa, that Core Mining did not purchase any equipment The equipment they had in the country was
I
all.
think we don't want to focus on coal mining. We want to talk about the joint venture partners who were there. Kusena was there. Because if you talk about coal mining not compliant, you also mentioned that Kusena and Ganyama were also not compliant. So the next question is that, so what did you do? On coal mining we've heard, you terminated it. Let's now go to the others that you're working with in terms of complying with the JV.
Yes, I'll go the Honorable Chair, but allow me to finish on coal mining. Because you asked me to explain what did you do about it.
I think let's be very clear that we ask you questions, if we've gotten enough information, we move on. And I think we have enough information on coal mining, you now terminated it. Let's go to the next companies. Thank you.
The next one was Jinyame. Jinyame was a 50-50% joint venture partnership. Again, we had the same problem. A due diligence had been done on Jinyame, and there had been indications that they were going to bring $15 million through a bank transfer into the country. That money never came. Again, investigations showed that monies were being deposited locally into the bank account, showing that no investment was actually coming into the country. The other aspect is that Jinyame, they were local partners. They were local partners who ended up making an application to ZMDC that since this company, the foreign investor, is not bringing any money, they would want themselves to borrow locally in order to make the joint venture work. And they borrowed some money on the local banks using their own personal properties as security. But there were then complications, shareholder disputes in Jinyame, with the result that it was not able to really move forward successfully. But I also, when you go to Jinyame, the other difficulty that we had was that we were instructed by government to give 20% in Jinyame to the Zimbabwe Republic Police. So we had 20%, ZMDC with 50%, then the ZRP coming in with 20%.
So just on a point of clarity, if you can just mention to us who actually gave that instruction, not just by government, which institution, who actually gave them that instruction to give 20% to police? Who was the person?
The Minister of Mines, Honorable Mpofu.
Was it through a phone call?
So, because that's exactly what we need to clarify in terms of joint venture partners, who they are. Government is 50%, who is Jiname, who is this one, so that we're pretty clear on that. So Jiname, yes, ZMD 50%, 20% police, 20% this one, so that there's also clarity.
Yeah.
So if next company can also be able to explain that, it will also assist us so that we have a clear understanding.
There was a question whether by telephone. No, it was in writing. That was an instruction in writing. First of all, it was 10%. Then, as we moved on, we were later advised to increase it to 20%. So even the due diligence, which was done on Jinyame in Ghana, the team comprised officials from ZMDC, Camelsa Chartered Accountants, and members of the Zimbabwe Republic Police. They went to Ghana to carry out due diligence on the capacity of the investor. So that again we terminated, when by the time I left, the termination had actually not occurred. But I had initiated the termination, my board had initiated the termination process when we saw that no meaningful foreign investment was coming in. So that's Jinyame. The other one is Kusena. Kusena, it was ZMDC, 50%. With the Central Intelligence Organization, every other 50%. But again, there were issues of capitalization, so production levels were very low.
We are continuing with all, and you mentioned Rera.
Then we mentioned RERA. I think when I left RERA, it really, they were still, I don't think that they'd actually been licensed by the time I left. I'm not sure. I could be mistaken, but they were on the ground, doing some workings on the ground. I know that they had brought in some money into the country for purposes of the investment, but there were still issues being discussed with the authorities. Then the other one is, sorry?
I think they want to know exactly who the owners of Rera are.
It was ZMDC and a South African company called, is it Austopia? It was some foreign investor, either South African or Canadian. I'm not sure about those details now.
You know, I'm just thinking, there's a human being saying, there's a joint venture between government and the JV partner who's supposed to bring in resources. And the JV partner is still Zimbabwe 50%, and there's no resources. I'm just trying to understand what is the role of the JV partner. If you could also explain that to us, because seemingly the JV partners were Zimbabweans, but they had no resources. So what was the role of the JV partner? At the same time, they are mining.
They have no license.
They are mining, some have licenses, some don't have.
I don't know which one had no license, Honorable Chair. They had licenses for
So you can continue.
For someone to mine in Marange, they had to have licenses. And the point I'm making is that if these licenses expired, I've said it's a moot point, but my own view, if you ask for my personal view, it was the responsibility of government to make sure that those licenses remained alive.
Okay, let's go to the other companies too, because what we want from you is, while we're talking about these companies, the next question is, how much money did they generate under MDC? In fact, to just put the question across to you, when you said MDC chairperson, dividends, how much did you give? That's really the question. We could go around the bush, where about revenue. How much money was declared as dividends under the chairmanship?
Yes, I think the finance person of ZMDC is here. They will be able to give those figures, because those figures will be recorded.
That is what interests us. Financial person, take off, tell us the figure.
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. In 2009, there was no dividend declared. In 2010, 51.8 million was declared. In 2011, 73.5 million was declared. In 2012, 39.2 million was declared. In 2013, 15 million was declared. In 2014,
So in 2013, how much was declared?
15 million.
15 million, so it went down from 73 million to 15 million.
It went down from 73, then to 39 million, and then to 15 million. And then in 2014, when the last dividend was made, it was now sitting at 9 million. By this, I'm talking of dividend declared to government of Zimbabwe, with the other half going to the other partners. So in total, 188 million was received to the Zimbabwean government, was another 188 million went to the JV partners. Thank you.
Okay, and then tax, how much tax did you pay?
The tax that was paid in 2010, it was, by this I mean the income tax or the corporate tax. In 2010, it was 34.8 million. In 2011, it was 11.4 million. 2012, it was 24 million. 2013, it was 17.8 million. And then in 2014, it was 6.9 million, to make a total of 94.8 million. Again, this was paid by Mbada, DMC, Jinan, and Marange. Thank you.
Basically, the rest of the companies never paid tax. Never actually contributed.
The ones that contributed, like I've said, are Mbada, DMC, Jinan, and Marange, and these figures are based on audited financial statements. Those are the entities that declared dividend, that paid tax.
What about the ones that did not?
Mr. Chairman, we do not have the financial statements for those entities. The ones I'm presenting are those entities that we have got the financial statements.
But surely speaking, if you're running a company, you've got 8 companies that give you something. You know 8 companies. Number 8 is Abukukama. 4 zikaputsa mkaka. 4 zikaputsa mkaka. Hautauri kuti azikaputsa mkaka. Isu tinakuziya dzasina kuputsa mkaka dzacho kuti ndedzipi. Maybe it was very clear. From a financial point of view, your projections are clear. Chero mwe mathematics nazinendele 20 anatengesa i5 ayakaora iwe financial CA utadza kututa izvo zvapanapa ari vakangatsaona nechokwadika macompanies angari ZFTC akashanda nawo mangani ari mangani akaunza mari ndeaya asina kuunza mari ndeaya tochienda. Yes, so in order to examine, yes. And Manjwaka, Honorable Sam is saying, and why do you not put money? You are already my own place, Zimbabwe, and I found out the money.
Again, like I said, Mr. Chairman, we are not in possession of the financial statements which indicate those figures. Possibly the respective entities have got the financial statements, or they've got the figures.
Sorry, I didn't get your response.
I'm saying we are not in possession of the financial statements for the entities that did not pay tax. Possibly the entities can present on their own, or they can indicate what they paid.
You see, this is where this is government in a JV. You are the one who finds the JV partner. Our role is to hold government accountable, not the JV partner. The account track, our former town, we choose not to say anything. Mr. Chairman, from a board perspective, all these companies were supposed to generate an income. And those that don't generate an income, it is stated they've not generated an income. And the next question is that, so what did we do about those that don't generate an income? But still, they are holding on to licenses.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Rera Diamonds did not yet started mining, so they did not generate any mining. Kusena Diamonds were still carrying out exploratory work, so to speak. They had really not started mining. The Jinyame, they had started mining and stockpiling, but there were issues that happened. I think that they will speak for themselves exactly what happened, but the reports we have is that on one day they were visited. He is here. I think if I do reported speech, Mr. Munyeza can speak for himself what happened at Jinyame, himself and the Zimbabwe Republic Police.
I think what we're trying to do is, everybody's here, we want to hear you as a government entity in mining on behalf of all the people of Zimbabwe. They all speak for themselves. And the issues that you are mentioning, let's be specific on the issues, because this is your accounting, and we cannot hide anything. You are under oath. What issues are these that you talk about? And let me remind you, under Parliament, you are protected by the privileges and immunities. So if anything happens to you or anybody threatens you after this, report to Parliament. So you are actually covered in all areas.
No, it's not that I'm afraid of anything. I'm simply saying the man is here, but I can explain, and then he can elaborate. What happened at Jinyame is that Mr. Munyeza here was the managing director, was called by the police, and the police kept a key to what is called the dot box, where you put the diamonds, one key. And Mr. Munyeza kept the other key, representing the investors. But he was called, and where he was forced to surrender.
Sorry, I think on a point of clarity before we move on, the police were keeping the key capacity.
Remember, they had a 20% shareholding.
Okay, so the 20% shareholding. Okay.
Exactly.
That's fine.
Exactly.
Okay.
They had a 20% shareholding. So he was forced to surrender the other key.
Sorry, Chairman. Was it the whole clarion of police forcing him?
Who? He will talk to the names of the specific.
You explain. He's here. You explain.
Yes.
Who did that. But can you continue with your?
So he surrendered the other key, and what happened to those diamonds, we don't know.
And then Anjin?
Anjin, I believe they've been mentioned there.
You've gone through all the companies of the JVs.
DT Osgeo, we...
You don't have a JV with them?
No, we
Okay,
don't.
that's
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Members, any clarity on this one before we...
Maybe through chair.
Yes, go on.
Maybe through your chair, just to keep the issues along the same lines so that at least we can understand. Maybe if it is possible, maybe if the police can just explain why they kept what happened to the diamonds.
I think it's in line with that. I think certainly they're going to respond because they're part of this joint venture of the JVs. So we are moving, ZMDC, government, the JVs have been mentioned. I think we're done with government. I go to Mr. Mungari before I go to the JV partners so that they respond to all issues. And we also respond to the fact that you did not deliver, you did not declare dividends and did all these licenses. You know, it's clear, it's now clear what you have to talk about. Yes.
Just a quick clarification. I think in his presentation he mentioned the increase from 10% initially allocated to ZRP, which was then increased by 100% to 20% stake for ZRP. Was there any justification for that increase from 10% now to 20%? And these are the same people who brought nothing except their names to the grand jury.
I think on that one, it is the minister who gave instructions. It's not him, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the person, or the minister who gave that instruction to respond to why from 10 it went to 20. He works under instructions and he says he had it in black and white and he had to implement. Yeah. Mr. Mugan, you took over. I don't know why I'm calling you Mrangai, but I'm not get offended, but I'm very sorry about that, Mr. I don't know why. You know, I'm very sorry about that. It is a very special name, and I'll say it properly now. Mrangai, board chairman, can you just take over from that? Equally, talk about the ZCDC company which you formed as the former Secretary Yanga said.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I need to make some corrections here. First, the list that was read out by the finance manager on the dividends does not include Angie. I think he stated it at the beginning, it's Kusent. Those figures relate to Mbada, DMC, and Jinak only, and not the others. I need to make that correction. Anyway,
that we will come back to that question.
Yeah.
The Angie, what did they contribute? Financial director, chairperson of the board. He will respond to that after his presentation. Thank you.
Right. The ZCDC. I regret to say that this corporation initially, when the issue of consolidation was brought up, the ZMDC met with all the different partners in the companies, in the diamond companies. And at the end of that, we made a report that went to the ministry, and we were not in favor of consolidation in term, because of certain clauses that were in the contained in the various agreements. And our preference would have been that let the ZMDC, let those companies which were operating continue until they ran out of whatever diamonds they were mining out of the alluvium. And then, former ZCDC, the structure was originally that ZMDC will be 50% and these other companies, if they were interested, they would then share the 50%. But our recommendation wasn't to do the consolidation the way it was done. However, due to the fact that this was a government decision coming from cabinet, when it was announced, every operation halted. Every operation halted in the area. However, the formation of the ZCDC happened at the ministry, and I only realized, I was told my name was put in as the other founding shareholder. I don't think I'd been consulted on that. We did not have a board resolution on that formation of that company.
Okay, Professor Mujan, I hope you are following this, that the company was formed at ZCDC, and there was never a board resolution. I just want you to take note. I don't need a response. I just want you to take note.
We were only told that the company had been formed, and that I was told that my name was on it. And so that situation is what it is. The shareholding by the ZMDC only happened much later, when the company was then, I think it was after queries that were raised by this committee, that the situation was corrected, and in the end, under the ZMDC as our subsidiary. But to be honest, there's still a problem with the type of reporting. The reporting, the CEO goes straight to the ministry. And is rather than bypassing the ZMDC. Be that as it may, we now have copies of the Articles of Association, and we're looking at them to see what our role is going to be as the major shareholder. Obviously, anything that we do is by right from government. So while we have the authority over the responsibility over the ZCDC, I think the authority to do anything with the ZCDC still lies with government. So the position right now is as I have stated. Thank you.
Sorry, a very important announcement to all of you here. There will be a call for fire. You all can, don't panic. It's just a fire drill, which is there. So, thank you very much, just for you to know. Mr. Mungari, the aspect of the JVs, which ZMDC is involved in terms of subsidiary, in terms of the diamond sector, can we say that ZCDC is actually a babe of the ministry, not your babe?
Well, as I said at the end of my presentation, Chairman, Honorable Chairman, apparently it is now our adopted baby. It's now under us. We now hold we hold the shares on behalf of government as ZMDC, and our name is on it. So we're busy trying to sort out these minor issues of how we should communicate so that we can try and smoothen things and move forward. Thank you.
But you also did say that the CEO reports to the minister and doesn't report to the board. So how do you still say that it's your baby when the CEO doesn't report to you? Because there's got to be clarity. If it's a subsidiary of ZMDC, the CEO reports to the ZMDC board. The CEO cannot report to the minister. It is the ZMDC board that reports to the minister. Of course, the minister has a right to call whoever he wants, but in terms of corporate governance, and in terms of the reporting of the operations of the company, it's as if it is the minister who has all the information more than the board.
Honorable Chair, if I may respond to your question, that's what I ended up saying, that those are some of the issues now we're sorting out in-house. And frankly, that's now going to be sorted out between ZMDC and the ministry and ZCDC, so we can make sure that they know who they must report to and under what circumstances. Thank you.
Okay. We'll now move to the joint venture partners. Minister of State Security, we want to ask you, Comrade Tassa, that when the Minister of State Security, was there a diamond concession given to the ministry? If so, production-wise, how was it run? So that we understand. You also heard that it never did anything. It never had money, never contributed to anything. So what was the point of being in a concession? It's not helping you. So you need to take off
swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you. Committee Inspector, we might as well go to Honorable Chong as well, and Honorable Secretary. And DG Bonyo. And then you also have to go to the Acting Commissioner General for this session. This is Jim Atibiri to also take off.
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth, so help me God.
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth, so help me God.
If MMCZ is near you, can you also
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
Mr. Munyezo was mentioned. He's coming back. Mr. Rera again joint venture. The JV partners with ZMDC include as well so that we run this on.
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
While we were in Tanzania, we had asked of you to take off. You may take off this. Thank you.
You hold your Bible using your left hand and raise your right hand and you say, I swear the evidence that I give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
Is Angie here? Is Lada here?
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
DMC.
Where is Angie here? Okay.
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth, so help me God.
So is he here?
He's not here, Honorable Chair, but he has asked me to come in his stead.
No, but we cannot operate like this. He never wants to come. He never wants to come. We have people who have more power and political point of view and are here. He's just a permanent secretary of the Ministry of Defense. The former Minister of Defense is here. He cannot be law unto himself. He must be here. We have critical issues, the Secretary of Defense. We as Parliament have oversight over anyone, whether it's the military or not, that day. Here we want to ask questions. And as the chief accounting officer, just like we did with others, he must be able to answer. No, I'm not going to take it from you today. You're going to bring him here. I'm not going to take any evidence from you because this is totally out of order. You cannot be wasting time. He's a permanent secretary for defense. Defense engine has been mentioned. It's a controversial issue. We are given an opportunity to clear these issues. The minister is not the chief accounting officer. We are doing this procedurally. And it's probably best you also leave now because there is no point of you being here. You must come proper with your whole team. Thank you. May you excuse us. In fact, we want you on Thursday when the Honorable Vice President will be here on Friday, on the 13th. To which we have no choice but to call the Vice President in charge of defense. Can you go to the pen set for one of please? In fact, I must thank you, Mr. Manchaya. He had a trip outside the country. He postponed his trip for this as a permanent secretary. And that's the sort of attitude that we need in this country.
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
Sorry, who do you represent?
Angel Investments.
Okay, thank you.
I swear that the evidence that I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
I think we may proceed where it is that, okay, sorry. Thank you very much. That was very clear to us.
Said, help me God. He promised to say the truth. Thank you.
Okay, yes, little back.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman, members of the committee, and all of us who are here. Mr. Chairman, I have very little evidence to give because we never discussed mining of diamonds in the department during the period that I was minister. Yes, we went to investigate undertakings that were not proper, but they were not undertakings by the ministry or the department, but it was undertakings that were done by other people and not by ourselves. I thank you very much.
I think this is emanating from the fact that there was a concession given to Kusena. And Kusena, you were well informed, and you heard this ZMTC chairperson, Mr. Masimbe, were talking about the Central Intelligence Organization, which, if I'm not mistaken, is CIO, which is housed under the Ministry of State Security. So it is really from that where we are saying a Central Intelligence Organization. Can you tell us about your operations in terms of that?
Mr. Chairman, may I make it clear that it was not a matter that was brought before me as the minister. I'm not sure whether it was brought to other ministers. Perhaps those who are responsible who are here would clarify that. When I was minister, we never discussed about mining by the department. Yes, I heard about Kusena, but it was really not brought to my attention as a mining concern of the department during my period.
So is it your evidence that there are certain operations that happen in the Central Intelligence Organization that the minister is not aware of? And is mining part of the Central Intelligence Organization's business?
So, I mean, there are matters that are held by the accounting officer. And in my case, the accounting officer is here, Mr. Bonyongwe. Perhaps you could refer this question to him. But he never discussed Kusena with me during the time that I was minister.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable former Minister, Honorable Dimas Mutasa, may you put it on record before we go to the Honorable Bonyongwe. Can you put it on record that you were never at any given time consulted that the CIO department was involved in mining in Chiazo? And if you can put it on record that you only heard of it maybe through reading from newspapers, but it was never at any given time that you had a meeting with him to discuss about this thing, or to discuss as an organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, I do. But I accept your request that it be put on record. I never discussed this matter with Mr. Manyongwe or any official of the department during the period that I was minister. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Masiro, you talked about the Central Intelligence Organization, and this is CIO of another country.
No, it's the CIO of this country, and the official, one of the directors is here, Mr. Mazingira. He is one of the directors of Kusena.
Okay, we'll move to the former Director General Onyongo in terms of the chief accounting officer, as Colin Mutasa mentioned. Colin Bulungu, are you aware of the Senate concession that has been given to you so that you mine diamonds?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for giving me the floor. And I want to acknowledge receipt of summons which were served on me to come and appear here before the Committee on Mining and Energy, which you chair, Mr. Chairman. And the point which was raised in the summons was that we would be discussing the production levels at the joint venture between the Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation, ZMDC, and the President's Department, which is otherwise known as the Kusena Mine. I would want to respond first to what the Honorable former Minister Didmas Mutasa said. Ministers come and go into departments, and that is at various times. Minister Mutasa, I think, was the Minister of State for National Security from 2005 to 2008. That was the first time he was minister. And yes, it is correct, during that period, we never were into issues to do with mining as a department. Then after that, it was a Minister Sekiramai who was minister from 2009 to the year 2013. And then Minister Mutasa came back for a short stint from 2013 to 2014. So really, those were the periods which are under consideration. I mean specifically, really the period from about, I think, 2009, 2010 to about 2011, 2012, and we were not with Minister Mutasa at that time. Allow me at this juncture, I think, to shed some light on the Kusena Diamonds mining project. So that I think once we remove that, questions can come, and if there are others who have to feed in more information, then that can be done. The context for investment or participation by a department like the President's Department into mining, it must be remembered, is one which really has to be understood in the context of the economic situation which we were going through as a country at that time, the period which I'm making reference to. And there were problems to be funded by Treasury because of those economic difficulties which we were going through. And therefore, we found it necessary to undertake certain operations which could raise funding to supplement the meager resources which were coming out of the Ministry of Finance. And of course, we are aware of Chiazwa and the issue of diamonds, which was there, and therefore we thought it was necessary to undertake, in partnership with investors, operations there. And so it was that in the beginning, we were able to find, as a department, someone who wanted to invest. And that was a company which was known as China International Fund. And so we partnered them, and they were able to bring in some equipment which was worth about, I think, up to about $10 million US. That equipment comprised of the plant water supply system, which included a 110 kVA generator, some 14,000 liter fuel tanks, 2 kilometers of pipeline, some office equipment, including some air-conditioned sleeping quarters and offices for the staff, a canteen, another generator, 75 kVA, and about, as I said, 2 kilometers of pipeline. Then we also had some plant, which was a grizzler. That's a plant for feeding stock into the density medium separator, a DMS. This particular DMS was about 10 tons per hour in terms of its capacity. That is fairly small, and in fact it is deployed when you are doing some exploration work. When you now look at the real operations themselves, you are looking at very big machines going to about 100 tons per hour. And for, I think, the big boys, Yombadas and so on, they ended up with DMSs of that size, and in some cases perhaps not one, but quite a number of them. I am mentioning this so that we understand the scope and the scale of what the department was involved in. It was a very small plant, 10 tons per hour. And a number of other items which were brought in, earth-moving equipment, which was excavators, front-end loaders, dump trucks, and various such equipment. So that's the equipment which went in, but not exceeding about $10 million. That particular investor, China International Fund, went in to do exploration, as I have indicated. The plant, the DMS, and most of the equipment were designed really for alluvial diamond mining. The hope was that there would be alluvials which are easier to scoop up and then also to process, and not the conglomerate which was mentioned by Minister Chidakwa, which needs quite some huge investments for you to be able to go into the earth and then extract the rock there, smash it, and get the diamond out. So there it was, the investor went in, tried to find alluvials at claims which are claims D and H in Chiazwa, which when you compare with the other claims which are there, these were more on the periphery, and they were not really that rich. And in fact, we found that there were no alluvial diamonds on those claims. And therefore, the investor, after doing some work, decided that it was not a worthwhile investment, and he decided to leave. That particular investor wanted to take this equipment out of the country at the time. We then said as a department that he could not do so, because what we had been able to do was to clear that equipment. And therefore the customs clearance which we did was our own contribution into the equipment, and so we refused that he takes the equipment out of the country. And so faced with a scenario where he could not take that equipment out, he ended up donating that equipment to the department. So there it is, we ended up with about $10 million worth of equipment in a camp which had been set up for diamond mining. We as a department were not experts in mining. If anything, perhaps we could do some security. And we then needed someone to partner with in mining. This is how we then came up with ZMDC. We then went into a joint venture with the ZMDC on a 50-50% basis, and made it very clear that we were not miners. They were the experts in mining. Could they do the mining? And we found ourselves with this equipment. Take it over. If there are any additional pieces you want, then secure that, but you mine. We provide security. And then we will be very happy to get the proceeds of that mining enterprise. So that is what basically happened. And this was during the period from 2011 when Minister Sekiramai was our minister. There was created a board of directors which was set up. We looked at all the structures, issues of corporate governance and so on were very important. And so structures were set up. The person who became the chairman of the board was the late Jonathan Kazura, who was appointed to that position by the ZMDC because they were the lead partner here, being the experts in mining. The general manager also was from ZMDC, as were the finance executive and the plant manager. And basically, according to my story, really the ZMDC took over and they ran the mine. We provided some security, essentially. Now, what were the production statistics as was requested in the summons? The gem quality diamonds which were realized were some 833 carats. Then near gem or semi-gem was only about 784.45 carats. Then industrials came to some, let's see, 11,091.9 carats. The grand total coming to 13,989.95 carats. That is what was produced by the ZMDC from what we understand. The entire enterprise, because there were some bits of equipment which were then procured by the ZMDC. We understand that the mine, when set up, was worth more than the $10 million, which I have made a reference to. But anyway, for present purposes, those carats were sold, we understand, by the ZMDC. The amount of money, there was a reserve price of about $650,597.27, but the total amount which was realized was $1,012,906.08, which was realized. And that really was the money which was realized by the joint venture. The money never came to the department. The money, as far as we understand, is with the ZMDC. We never got anything out of it. And as we moved on, then came the era of consolidation, which was now towards the end of the year 2013. And basically the players now in the Ministry of Mines were Minister Walter Chidakwa, then we had Secretary Gujanga and Mr. Murangari, chair of the ZMDC. Those became the players. And the point which we were raising as a department was that with consolidation coming online, maybe it was time for us as a department to exit diamond mining. It had not benefited us anything really, but what we wanted from them and what I hope that the department will be able to get from the Consolidated Diamond Company would be perhaps something from the equipment which we contributed to that endeavor. We gave that equipment, ZMDC, now it's part of the equipment of the Consolidated Diamond Mine. Some evaluations would need to be done. And at one time, I think the equipment was now, after depreciation and so on, estimated to be worth about $6 million. And I would be very happy if the ministry and the consolidated company could perhaps give something to the President's Department for that effort which it made to secure some investment into diamond mining from outside. And we ended up with that equipment. And the diamonds which were realized, they have the diamonds anyway. We never got the diamonds. And that's the end of the story. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
My question is, the entire intelligence that you have from the country, how do you dictate the diamonds where they reach?
Oh. Well, I've said, I think that we are not experts in diamonds and in mining in general. That's the point I make. We applied for a concession. Yes, we knew that they were richer concessions and so on, but it was not for us to go and say, really, the decision by the Minister of Mines to allocate us a certain concession was wrong. We were allocated a concession, we accepted it and proceeded, as I have explained. If we had perhaps been given a richer concession, it might have been a different story. Something could have been realized. And I say this, I think, on the back of the structures which we set up and so on, and the way in which we tried to execute matters in the department in a very transparent and efficient manner. And in this case, anyway, I don't regret it, because anyway, we were able to realize something for our country. That amount of equipment which we ended up with, and the diamonds the ZMDC have got. So we did something, we contributed something as the President's department under my leadership. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair. What we are looking for as a committee ultimately is $15 billion worth of revenue, which was realized from diamonds. And by extension, the money that was realized ultimately from all diamonds sales. Do you stand by your point that part of that money would be resident with at the ZMDC, as you allude to? Because this is part of the revenue that was realized from the diamonds. Would you stick to your point that part of the $15 billion that you excavated and realized is with ZMDC as we speak?
Mr. Chairman, my answer to that is an emphatic yes. I stand by my assertion. Thank you. Mazvita pavakanga vashaya madiamonds paclaim yatakapuwa vakatiwo vanga vakuda kutora equipment yavo vabude vaende vachiti vane maoperations avaigona kuita kune dzimwe nyika muAfrica. Saka it was equipment yakanaka yanga iri nyowani and iri air portable. I think ndo inzwira vakashandisa isi tikati tinoruza panapa. Ndokubva tati pamakauya nayo makati tiitei tikaiclear. Saka icontribution yedu yatakaita yedu tese, hamuchagona kuitora kubuda nayo kubva muZimbabwe. Saka hazvichaita tikaguma tahwina argument yedu vakati alright hazvichinei chitorai, ndokubva tapuka. Mazvita
I think the question is pertinent. You see that the diamond industry, there are allegations of the security being heavy-handed. And then I will actually say that there was a joint venture with them. They did not get what they were wanting. And they had the right to leave with their equipment. But I think in a way, she's basically saying you now used that state security status to say you can't go. Because I think in a simple business transaction, and then I'm saying this for any investor who must come to this country, that even if you're a joint venture partner with state security, defense, or police, the aspect of governance must still apply. So did you have an agreement? Because now I will lead to the next question. What agreement did you have with them?
Okay. Vakatipa and vakatipa vachifara. Maonero andakaita here. But nyaya yakadai upenyu kawo munotaurirana. Munhu anotaurawo zvaari kufunga, iwewo mupindurawo. Ndichiri kutorememba ndiri kumuona muridzi wacho achisekerera achitipa. Handifungi kuti pane nyaya yakashata yakaitika ipapo, handifungi. Rest assured, no, it was fine. And sure, the important thing is when you clear equipment, munopeya duty kuzimura or whatever, munoita contribution, moti maane joint venture, equipment yedu tesi. Then vamostanga kuita try to disentangle that oti ndakutora ichi ndakudai ndakutika, but chachiko ichi musadaro vakatinzwisisa kugonawo kutaura zvakada kwatakaita mazvitai.
I think it requires more. I think we can take this session seriously to help. Out of an agreement. An agreement between you and your partner. And I'll ask the question, who is the party?
Hello. Right. I thought, Mr. Chairman, that I had actually answered you. The issue here was whether I should go in the Shona way to answer also, because it became one question. It was an agreement that they give us, they donate, and it was a donation. And a donation in law is an agreement. There is an offer and you accept. Yes.
Can you finish this committee agreement? I think that one.
Not a written agreement, a verbal agreement.
Okay, can we know the partner? Could we also want to invite them?
China International Fund. I gave that name.
Okay, so if you give us the
I did.
The partners, because it would be good for us to hear the other side of the story. Thank you. I think we are done with that. Honorable Matamana.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Honorable the Tauro Panya Tauro na G Abonu and ndakachifunga kuti zvakanyanyoma nokuti vabvunzwa mubvunzo wakaoma. Ndakachifunga kuti muchasinyadzisa bhari matilabisi makonda. I just want to say, because we are Chairman,
no order. Can I guide you pertaining to how this committee is run? We never say that. We will talk about that on our own in terms of deliberation. Can you withdraw that statement?
Oh, I withdraw. Now withdraw some. Asikanira kungotsinira andika mubvunzo wangu ndokuti muno mashoko angu ndeyekuti mambotaura chairman vataura muno vakati hatina kuuya kuzodi kuzoita inonzi uchandi andizvo saka kana munhu agona
I think we're in a serious session, and if you continue, I have no choice but to reject you. What is your point of clarity? If it seems you don't have it, the time has been taken away from you. You cannot speak anymore. Thank you. You must proceed. Honorable Menga, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I just want to ask you, the former DG, considering what Honorable former Minister Mutasa just said, that he was never consulted, and he came back to the ministry, I think, from 2011 to 2013, I can't remember. Already there were some operations which the department was doing. Can the former DG explain to us why they didn't inform the then Minister, Honorable Mutasa, considering that they had already started the operations in as far as the diamonds are concerned? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. When Mamtasa came back, that was 2013 to 2014. Really, that was the period when the ZMDC now were in charge of the mining operations, as I indicated. Perhaps what we should have done was before this to try and refresh each other's minds on perhaps the briefings which were given or were not given. I would want to believe that when one takes into account the elaborate system of briefings which exist in the department, that we would have at some point at least mentioned that there was some claim in Chiazwa to which we were part with the ZMDC, and there should be some operations which are taking place. But then anyway, Mamtasa is my senior and I don't want to argue on this. That's basically what I will say. Thank you.
I think, DJ, can we conform to the rules of this? Parliament doesn't really deal with seniors. I think you guys you do outside. We're talking about corporate governance. What we're trying to get to is the Minister of State Security. You're the Director General. Who reports to who? And I think we must be very clear. We're talking about corporate governance issues, and you can go left, right, and center. What I need to understand, how can this point is very clear. You're the Minister of State Security. And he equally must know what is going on in the organization. So if there were diamonds being managed to you, making money, he was never going to know. So in terms of that structure, how come you spoke also of Minister Sekelamai, then was Minister of State Security, the Office of the Director General? In terms of this mining concession, were you supposed to report elsewhere or to the minister? We must be very clear. Yes, we'll go left, right, and center. Ours is a simple question from an oversight point of view, using the government institutions which are there. There's a minister, there's a permanent secretary. In terms of state security, there's a Minister of State Security, there's a Director General. So in terms of accounting, the committee wants to understand who were you reporting to. We're also aware that the Director General reports directly to the President. So there's the Commissioner General. We're also aware of that. But in terms of the operations of the ministry, because we are in a situation where people with impunity have gone on to make decisions to the detriment of this country. So we're going to hold you accountable as Director General. Why did the ministers not know of this? Because there's a handover, takeover. In any structure, these are government institutions which have got handover, takeover. When a new minister is coming, he's briefed on the operations. What you do? Whoever comes in, that is the reason why institutionalism is what we're emphasizing on, not personalities. So the moment you say he's a senior, that's personal. I don't take that. I want him to be addressed as a former minister of state security, you as the DG. So, nyaya dzekuti senior aiva, ini ndikuda kuti mupindure vari minister we-state security, imi muri director general siyawo, kune mai license yamakapiwa, sesiyawo, tichitenderana kuti wonge ikonomi yanga isina kumira mushe makapiwa, munotenderwa, hapana chinorapa. Ikasitaka generatwa chi, vakuru babasa, minister, vaiziva here zvaisei. That is his question, which was answered.
Mr. Chairman, I answered that question. Let me answer it in very clear terms. The minister was briefed. And if you noticed the carefulness with which I considered that question, I didn't just answer it myself only. I consulted the director to my right. Because briefings which are given, even when somebody arrives and so on and so forth. So the minister was briefed.
So you realize that in your great presentation you gave, you are prevaricating.
No, I'm not prevaricating on anything.
Maybe I'll explain to you what prevaricated means in terms of pretending on your rules. Since you're a lawyer, you can also understand. So that everybody understands that you cannot prevaricate when you're before us. One statement remains that.
Yes.
you see, now we have a situation where the minister clearly, under oath, says he never knew about this, he was not briefed. But then came to you again, and then you said, yes, you can confirm that the minister was not briefed because there were many ministers changing. You mentioned Minister Mtasa coming in for a certain stint, then Minister Sekemai came in, and so forth. I pay attention to issues that you raise, and I'm just trying to go back to the narration of what you presented before us.
Okay.
That ministers come and go, yes, we agree, and Minister Mtasa says, I was not briefed about it. And you had agreed on that, that yes, clearly that was not done. Then you now say the minister was briefed.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. I think there is the issue of the time frames. That is what I was explaining. The time frames which were, yes.
I think I've gotten enough from you. Let me go to Mr. Mtasa. Mr. Mtasa, the former minister, I think he said he briefed you.
So I didn't follow your last part of the question.
The DG is stating that he did brief you on the going on of the Senate accusation that CRO had, contrary to you saying that you were not briefed about that.
Mr. Chairman, I think if you recall, the DG said the question of diamond mining came in 2011, and I was not the minister at that time. And when I went back into the ministry in 2013, it was only for a short time, and I believe that the briefings might have been done to the minister who was in office then, and perhaps that is the matter that you need to clear. But definitely I want to repeat for the third time that I didn't know anything about us as the President's Department mining any diamonds. And as a matter of fact, it was a matter that I used to trouble the President about, because there were others who were being given concession, and I was wondering why we didn't get any. And the President could have told me too, that, by the way, you got it, but he didn't.
The only thing I want to confirm is the briefings that you get of this nature, are they also in black and white? Is there a report which is submitted to you as Minister of State Security on the operations of the Director General in terms of whatever they do?
Mr. Chairman, not during my tenure of office as stated. There were no reports in black and white except of incidents that may be under investigation. Those were you can find reports on that. But on this briefing, I do not think there was any.
Okay, we'll make progress. We have heard, we'll make progress on that. I think Honorable Nangan, I think a number of issues are coming to deliberate this. Honorable Matamana, what clarity do you need? You know, when you're given an opportunity to speak as chair, I think let's focus to issues.
Thank you, Chair. Patao pamba chitaurwa pambotaura former minister vaMtasa vati vandanzwa kuti vantivo vakangozvinzwa saka briefer sezvo vazotaura kuti vakangonzwa nokuti vakauya kunguva diki diki.
You're a joint venture partner with the ZMDC. There is the issue of joint venture partner, you and the managing director. Can you please respond to the aspect of the diamond production that you have been given to as a concession by the government?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the issue of Ginyama is a bit peculiar in that, yes, there was a local partnership in Ghanaians who had the undertaking to fund the operations from onset. So, and we went into a JV with ZMDC, just giving a brief narrative of the history. In the process, I would agree with Mr. Masimiriambwa that in the process, we were then told, not in writing though, that the police are being given a shareholding, a free carry shareholding, which was initially at 5%, not the 10%. It moved from 5% to 10% and then 20% in a space of a week. And these were all verbal communications. At one time, I know that together with the Ghanaians, we had now declined that we were not happy to proceed. However, after meeting the then minister,
Communications to you coming from whom?
where the chairman, as he narrated, as he was, so the chairman then conveyed the information to us. At one time, we actually were not happy to proceed, as stated. However, after meeting with the then Minister Mpofu, an agreement was that, look, we'll continue. And just also, the JV agreement had a condition precedent that we bring in 5 million before we even start. And that condition precedent was met. But however, over the course of the agreements, we'll finish the committee with the various agreements. Over the course of mining, an investment of 110 million was supposed to be done. So that we began mining, and from the onset, I think for us it was unfortunate. We started with an albatross around our neck. We had the police, we had high expectations, and not only high expectations, but we felt the way they pushed, they felt the concession was theirs. So we are not so sure what communication was done to them, because their behavior was that this concession was theirs. Block G, we were awarded the conclusion of our special grant was only done beginning of 2012. And immediately what we started doing was secure the concession. This was just basically a bush. Unlike other concessions, for those that are familiar with Chiadzwa, Mbada was already active before Mbada was awarded. Many other concessions, people had a fair understanding that they were definitely guaranteed alluvial diamonds on those particular concessions. But as for Block G, which is at the tail end of Chiadzwa, right at the confluence of Sabi and Odzi River, it was just a bush. And we had to create road networks. And then after that, it was not going to make sense for us to immediately start putting in money before we verify whether they were indeed diamonds, as you heard from the former DG, that they only discovered later that they were not alluvial diamonds of any substance after an investment was already done. For us, we then decided to do exploration. And we actually contracted SRK International to do the exploration for us, a process that took about 6 months. Once that was concluded around July, August 2012, we then decided to order our own DMS. But SRK had already told us that it was not total, they had not totally completed. All they were giving indications was definitely their diamond-bearing grains on our concession. And we ordered a DMS, a smaller one initially, a 20-ton. However, at that stage also, our Ghanaian partners were struggling with bringing in capital. And they had other issues, I think, which were quite documented in terms of illegal. Some of them were involved in illegal gold dealings, but that's another story. At the end of the day, we managed to bring in, we raised money locally. They had already contributed some money from Ghana, but when they could no more do that, we raised money as part of the investors, as the locals. We borrowed money from the banks that enabled us to bring in a 20-ton DMS, which was top end because it had everything, the sort house, grizzly machine, it had everything adjoined to it. We also put in place water tanks and various other ancillary equipment on site. However, at that same time, you find that the police, I'll refer to the police because our understanding it was the police, although their presentation in terms of Sierra 14s they produced to us as investment vehicles, they had no police officer on them, but that's for them to answer. they then opted that they didn't want the Ghanaians anymore. And I remember a particular day on a Saturday in October, I documented very well because I received various phone calls with one of the advisors to the then Commissioner General, telling me that I should dismiss the Ghanaians, of which I refused.
I think it's important to tell us who the advisors.
It was Faraim Tamangira.
Members, if you are giving us all evidence, name the person.
It was Faraim Tamangira who then told me that, look, we needed to get rid of the Ghanaians, of which I flatly refused because they had made their own contribution. We're a partnership. They, their own investor. That's what they had actually indicated. The investor was a company called Solel, based in Singapore. We understand they actually did the due diligence. Under what auspices, again, they will be able to answer. We fought that viciously because already we were disadvantaged. We started off with the 20%, unlike other investors, of free carry, and immediately employed in excess of 140 personnel in terms of security, of which half of that was were people who were already current serving police officers whom we were paying salaries which were already dictated. So for us already there was an element that we're being set up to fail. You find the frustrations why Mr. Masimo at MDC sometimes then wrote us letters saying that we're not happy with your progress. But the hemorrhage in terms of financial for a company that has not started operation was severe. Anybody who has gone into project will find that there's no need to have severe overheads before you actually start producing. However, we actually strove to finish off the project. Beginning of 2013, our DMS was delivered in February. And the people whom we bought it from South Africa managed to assemble it on site, and production started in March, just before Easter in 2013. And at that point, the squab was then, the shareholder issues rose again through the ZRP, who then spoke to the Ghanaians. The Ghanaians had been, part of them had been already expelled from the country because of illegal gold dealings. But they turned around the situation and they said, look, the locals want to dismiss you, so get rid of the locals. And sadly, the Ghanaians obliged initially. But they didn't have money because the money we were now using was local money raised by us. And when the banks realized this is what had happened, they stopped financing Ginyame. And they were stuck, the police and the Ghanaians, with no money. And the Ghanaians were dismissed. Immediately they were dismissed, I think around July, June, July of 2013, they were dismissed. But prior to that, in April, going to the matter that Mr. Masimirambo raised, a group of police officers, about 8 or 7 of them, came to our offices. At that point, I'd gone to pick up my child from school, and they demanded to see me. The guys at the office tried to tell them that, look, I wasn't in the office, but they said they wanted to speak to me. So eventually they spoke to me, and I told them I was at my child's school, of which they told me to wait there. They waited there. They had 3 cars, 2 police officers armed. I think I've got their names. There was a chief superintendent Dube and the detective inspector Makavi. 2 of them armed got into my car, and their main mandate was they'd been told that they must retrieve the dot box keys from me. Initially, I was very vicious, and I said, no, I would not hand them over. There was no need for me to do that. This is a plant that we had purchased using funds raised by us. Why would I hand over? Mining was now happening. I was going to be accountable. If they were going to take over the keys, let there be a proper handover, takeover. But they wouldn't listen to that. So they said they would drive with me, drop off my kid at home, and it was a convoy, the 3 cars in my car. We dropped off my child at home. They were together with me, and then we went to the CVR building in town. I was detained there for a couple of hours, which they kept on asking for the keys. I was refusing with the keys until eventually I was taken into a dark room and forced to hand over the keys. At that point, I had to hand over. There was no legal representation. Nobody was allowed to see me. I had to hand over the keys, and that was it. As to what then transpired to the stones that we had mined, I have no idea. But what we did immediately the following day, we wrote a letter, copied to the Commissioner General Police, whose name was being used as that he's the one who has ordered that particular retrieval of the dot box keys. But we copied as well, we copied the President's office. I think Mr. Bunyonge was then the former DG. You might recall, we wrote a letter to him, we wrote a letter to the then Minister Obet Mpofu, we wrote a letter to various people, just alerting them that, look, we have no control whatsoever anymore as to what is happening on concession G, Block G, which is Ginyame. And from there, absolutely with no control. The Ghanaians also left. So the police were there alone from about May, June 2013, right up to a period when creditors, whom we were paying before, then made representations and the company was put under judicial management, I think around towards the end of 2014. By then, the new minister, Chidakwa, had come in and he was already speaking about consolidation. So then at that point, the police were then abruptly stopped from whatever they were doing. They continue mining. We don't know what happened and what then transpired with the stones. So basically, in terms of compliance, I would say Ginyame legally, we complied in terms of capital injection. Like I mentioned before, we were at our formative stage when consolidation came into place. There was no way we were expected to operate at the same level with Anjin, DMC, or Mbada. We had just started and still really discovering what was on site. Plans were very clear. I think we have evidence that we had already ordered a 50-ton DMS. So our growth was quite progressive, that we were going to be able to get to a satisfactory level of production. But for us, we would not have achieved it because of the shareholder issues that we then encountered. I think in summary, Mr. Chairman, that's the story of Engineering. I'll finish you with supporting documents. I'll finish the committee with supporting documents of what was done, what was on the ground in terms of Ginyame, what development we did on the ground. We built houses. There was road networks. Everything was there. There was a pipeline. We can finish that information. And up to that, we never realized a single cent from our investment up to now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Honorable Sagamana, just one question. When you Minister of State Security, did you get any briefing or plan concession that the National Senate, did you know about it?
Honorable Chairman, honorable members of this committee, honorable Chairman, honorable members of this committee, ladies and gentlemen, yes, I got a briefing from the DG about going forward.
Okay, thank you. We shall break for lunch after such a